Welcome back to another episode of the CS Podcast, Bears post-game show presented by the NUC NFL Draft Bible. Visit NFL Draft Bible visit NFLDraftBible.com. Follow on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible. As always, I'm your guys' host, Chris Shanafelt, and it is another Bears loss. The Bears fall to the Detroit Lions at Soldier Field, 24-20. Another slow start for the Bears. They trailed 10-0 heading into the half. And they now finish the season 6-10. The Lions are now 7-9. Bears fall to fourth and last place in the NFC North, 1-7 at Soldier Field. And the last time the Bears defeated the Detroit Lions, whether it's in Detroit or here in Chicago, was December 30th, 2012. And to talk about this game and really the Bears season as a whole, he joins me pretty much every week. He's Aaron Leming from Bear Report, bearreport.com. Give him a Twitter at Aaron Leming NFL. And Aaron, can you believe that the last time the Bears won against the Lions, December 30th, 2012?
Yeah, it's been they've had a lot of trouble, especially within their own division. It's not a good look, but at the same time, I definitely think they're in the right direction. This is one of those, the loss always hurts, but at a certain extent, it's kind of beneficial. I mean, they get better draft positioning, and even though they did lose, ultimately it was a good look for them today. They were able to battle back. I mean, they really didn't have much talent on the field as usual, even more than usual, with all the injuries that they've had. So overall, I can't get too upset about the loss. And overall, I would say the season's been a success. They've definitely improved all the way around and had a lot of injuries and had a lot of issues all the way around. They've had a top 5 hardest schedule in the league. Overall, yeah, it's disappointing. It's 6-10. It's another losing season. But at the same time, there are improvements and this team's definitely going in the right direction.
Again, the Bears fall to the Lions 24-20. Matthew Stafford had himself a day. He threw for nearly 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Megatron, Calvin Johnson had another big day, 10 receptions, 137 yards and a score. Why do you think the Bears weren't able to stop the quarterback-wide receiver duo in either of their 2 meetings this season?
I think they've just really had a lot of issues with stopping Calvin Johnson in general throughout his career. I really think the only guy that's really been on the matchup on him has been Charles Tillman. And obviously now that he's not with the Bears, not with Carolina, they just really don't have that corner to be able to match up one-on-one. The good news is it does look like, barring a huge pay cut or some sort of restructure, he probably won't be back with Detroit next year. So that's the good news. But, it's been something as simple as, they really just don't have the manpower right now. Tracy Porter is pretty good corner overall. He's just been, somewhat inconsistent. And quite frankly, he's not over 6 foot. He's not a very physical guy. He's maybe their best cover guy, but overall I think Fuller matched up better with him. I didn't really get the matchup today, but, it's really hard to stop a guy like that, especially Stafford's known the Bears for a while. He's been playing against them for a while, and so is Calvin Johnson. So it's just one of those tough matchups, and, it's just something that they got to improve upon, and I think they will. They've got a lot of money this offseason. They've got 9 draft picks at least. So I think they'll get it figured out.
And you know what? You touched on it a little bit there, Aaron. It doesn't look like Calvin Johnson will be returning to Detroit unless he takes a pay cut. He's due a ton of money next season. And I believe it was Brady Quinn. He was kind of alluding to this throughout the game where, if Alshon Jeffrey doesn't return, can you personally see a situation where Alshon doesn't return and the Bears go after Calvin Johnson this offseason?
I really can't. No, I don't really think that fits the mold. It's been kind of, some of the other questions like Mario Williams and the different guys like that. The Bears are looking to go younger. They're looking to keep their own guys. They're looking to develop their own talent, but they're also looking to, get younger talent, guys like Mel McPhee, players like that. So, no, I don't think that really fits the mold. As far as the Jeffrey thing goes, I think there's a lot of paranoia right now. And I guess it's understandable to a certain extent because Ryan Pace hasn't extended anybody. But they do have full control of the situation. They have a tag that they could use for the next 2 years. Tag this year is going to run around $14.5 million. Personally, I think he's worth it. And, a lot of people are saying that he's injury prone. And, to a certain extent, okay, yeah, he had a rough year as far as health goes, and he had a rough rookie year. But he also had 2 seasons in between where he didn't miss any time, I think. this year, you really look at it. I mean, I tweeted out earlier, there's been a total of 41 games between their top four receivers and their top two tight ends that have been missed altogether. I mean, including Kevin White. I mean, that's huge. They just really haven't had good health all year. I mean, we saw that today. We saw some of the guys that they had on the field. So it's just part of the game. I do think he'll be back in some capacity. John Mullen from CSN Sports also was talking about that and said that there's actually a decent chance that they may be able to get some sort of long-term deal done. I really haven't heard much about that. I do know that. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for them not to keep him. So I think at very worst, they'll at least franchise tag him and try to work out a deal with him. I mean, I know the value is going to be a little skewed, especially on his part, especially coming off a rough season like that. But it's worth noting. I mean, he had 9 games that 8.5 that he played in overall. He wasn't really healthy for many of those, and he still put up, about 800 yards. He averaged just under 100 yards a game. So, I mean, he's definitely still got the value. I think him with Kevin White would be a great combo, and I think that's something that they're really going to look towards, especially I don't see Martellus Bennett the impact. So we'll have to see what happens. There's a lot of interesting moves on their part, but I do think Jeffrey's going to be back, and even if he's not, I don't see any scenario to where they would go after somebody like Calvin Johnson, who's already over 30.
Okay, and yeah, I mean, when Alshon Jeffrey is out there, I mean, he has a huge impact on the game. Even when he's not 100% healthy, I mean, hasn't really been 100% healthy this whole season. You go back to last season, he had a few injuries as well. So, all right, yeah, I mean, I fully expect Alshon Jeffrey back here, whether it's on a franchise tag or maybe they get a deal done. What do you make of the 1-7 home record? I mean, the 1-7 home record at Soldier Field for the Bears. I mean, is there any specific reason as to why they just couldn't get the job done at home? And on the road, they were all right. They were 5-3, over 500.
Yeah, it's they've had a really tough schedule. I mean, there's really no way around that. I mean, you look at the first 3 games that they had at home with Packers, Cardinals, and Raiders, and they won, obviously, one of those games. But, I mean, you also had the Vikings. You had the Broncos. And, there's really no excuse, don't get me wrong on that. But, I mean, you look at who they faced at home, and there was a pretty good amount of playoff teams in that. Obviously, the Packers, the Cardinals, the Vikings, and then also the Broncos and the Redskins. I mean, so you got 5 teams 5 playoff teams from this year that all faced at home. I mean, there's really no excuse for it. But I think some of it has to do with the playing surface. I really do. And then also the weather's been a little weird this year. I mean, it really hasn't got that cold. This is the first time that we saw any sort of snow, or really, to my knowledge, I think the first time that or maybe the second time that it got, under 30 degrees the whole entire year. I think it's been a little weird. And I still think this team's trying to find their identity right now. I mean, it's really like they said in the broadcast, they had 17 guys that were on the 53-man roster from last year that transferred over to this year, and they were missing a lot. I mean, there's just really, it's been one of those weird years. Overall, I think they played a lot better than most people expected, including myself. But there's definitely room for a lot of improvement. But as far as the home record goes, I think a lot of that has to do with the teams that they played, and quite frankly, they just look more comfortable on the road this year. So I think the city of Chicago is going to have to do something in terms of the turf. I mean, it really is it's not acceptable for anything. It's not acceptable for, Pee Wee, and it's definitely not acceptable for, multi-billion-dollar industry like the NFL is. So I definitely think they're going to have to do something about that, and I do think that does play some sort of part in it, but I really don't have a good answer for you at this point.
And you hear players, week after week, year after year, talk about how Soldier Field, I mean, you hear the Washington Redskins field, they also get some attention as well when it comes to some of the worst playing surfaces in all of the NFL. Soldier Field is certainly up there, and we'll see if the city of Chicago does anything with the turf. Jay Cutler, it was certainly a game to forget. Again, this is a game where he's, of course, without Alshon Jeffrey. Kevin White hasn't played it all this season. Martellus Bennett has been out for probably the last month or so. Zach Miller out. I mean, he's throwing to guys like Josh Bellamy, Cam Meredith. Mark Mariani was the team's leading receiver today, and it was Jay Cutler's first multi-interception game of the season. He threw 3 interceptions this afternoon. Just give me your thoughts on his overall performance this season, though. I mean, I think there's a lot to like, and as I mentioned last week, Aaron, I mean, there's pretty much no doubt that he'll be the team's quarterback next season. And heading into this season, we really didn't know what to expect out of Cutler.
Yeah, I think he's really surprised a lot of people, including myself. I think he's had a great year. I mean, going into the game today, he had 3,400 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And obviously now it's going to change a little bit, but he's still finished pretty well. It's going to be the first time in his career that he's finished with a quarterback rating over 90. I think it's going to be right around 93, 94. So I mean, overall, it's he's had quite the interesting season. Obviously, the offensive line has been pretty bad. The receivers have just missed an unreal amount of time. There's been no Kevin White. Alshon Jeffries missed a good amount of games. It's really crazy when you start looking at all the different things that have gone wrong, and yet he's still been able to do a pretty good amount with it. So I mean, overall, yeah, he's had a really good year. It's been very surprising. I definitely think this is a good building block. I know obviously Adam Gase is going to be a top head coaching candidate, and I do expect him to leave. I do think he'll end up taking a job. But at the same time, I mean, Dow Loggins, or quarterback coach like we talked about before, I think he's a big key to why Cutler has been as good as he has and as comfortable as he has. And this is somebody that Cutler's wanted to work with for a while. That's not taking away anything from Adam Gase at all, but I don't think, judging by just John Fox in general and his track record with coordinators or replacing coordinators, they don't usually see much of a drop-off, if any at all. I mean, I remember back in Denver when, Mike McCoy got his shot to go to Kansas City, and there was a lot of talk about how the offense wasn't going to be able to be the same. Adam Gase comes in, and they're, historically one of the better offenses in the history of the game. Then very next year ranked, number one in everything, were very, very good. And then, last year they were also very good. So, overall, I think they'll be able to make it happen. Even if Gase does end up leaving, I don't think that's really going to affect Cutler too much. If they don't go Loggins, I do expect them to go with somebody, probably Ken Wisenhunt's one of those guys that could end up being a good option for them too. I know John Fox really wanted to go with him over Adam Gase, actually, but I guess there's a report out there that John Elway didn't. So overall, I think Cutler has made some really good strides. I mean, he obviously is about to be 33 years old. He's not getting any younger. But if you get this kind of play out of your quarterback, which I think has been top 10, top 15 in the league, as long as they have a better team around him, I think they're going to be really good moving forward.
And, of course, tomorrow is Black Monday. I mean, we already have 3 head coach openings with Philadelphia, Miami. They got an interim head coach. They've had the interim for most of the season. And I know there's one more out there. It was just in my mind. Totally forgot. But anyways, yeah, there's already a few head coach openings. And tomorrow there will be more to come. It certainly looks like, I believe I seen earlier, there's a report that, Philadelphia, Miami, Cleveland, and maybe even Indianapolis, if they get rid of Chuck Pagano. Those could be a few hot spots for Adam Gase as he looks for a head coaching gig. Like you, I fully expect Adam Gase to get one of those head coaching jobs. And I guess going back to Jay Cutler, of course, towards the end of the game, there's a little scuffle there. Cutler shoving Ziggy Ansah, who was making a lot of noise this afternoon in the backfield, and then in comes Kyle Long at Jay's defense. I know some people may think it's a little bush league or whatever, but personally, I love seeing that. I mean, I love seeing the guys kind of back up their teammates, and you obviously wouldn't think of anything else, anything less from a guy like Kyle Long backing up Jay Cutler. I mean, what did you make of that whole little scuffle there towards the end of the game, Aaron?
I didn't really have an issue with it. Nobody got hurt. There was no real cheap shots, in my opinion. I think it was more of Cutler getting frustrated, and Ansah is obviously a much bigger player, and I think it just kind of led from there, and Kyle Long took his quarterbacks back like he usually does, and that was about it. I mean, it's an interdivision game for one. There's a lot of frustration. Both teams, obviously didn't finish too good. So, overall, I don't really think there's much to it. You see exactly what you want. I mean, you always have to love Cutler's fire. He's always been that way, and he's always going to be that way. And then obviously Kyle Long has always been the first guy to jump to Cutler's defense with anything. So I have no issue with it whatsoever, and I don't think these guys are going to think twice about it.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that was after the third interception thrown by Jay Cutler. Again, he is Aaron Leming of BearReport.com. Be sure to check out his work at BearReport.com, and, of course, follow him on Twitter at Aaron Leming NFL. And Aaron, I guess just give us your overall thoughts on the season. I mean, I wasn't really sure what to expect heading into this season. I thought that there was a chance that they could finish, 9-7, 10-6. And on the other hand, I also thought there was a possibility of 5-11, 6-10. So it isn't much of a surprise to me to see them finish this season 6-10. There were some really promising wins against teams such as the San Diego Chargers. They had a really nice victory at St. Louis, and of course the Packers game on Thanksgiving. And then again, there were some really disappointing losses against teams like the 49ers and Redskins, both at home. But I gotta say, I'm very impressed by this group, especially defensively, how quickly they were able to turn things around.
No, I agree. I think it's been a good year for them. Obviously, the expectations for the most part were pretty low. I had them projected going into training camp. I had them projected as about a 7-win team. Came out of training camp and really thought they were more of a 4 or 5-win team, but gave it 6. And that was basically what I had on paper. We talked during training camp. We sat down, we watched. I mean, there was some interesting things going on in training camp. I mean, obviously, a lot of it was just there wasn't much talent. So going into the season, I really had low expectations. But the biggest thing is, I mean, yeah, they finished 6-10, but 11 of those 16 games were all within 6 points of each other, and that's something big. And that's something definitely moving forward. That's going to be a big thing. Even going to today, I mean, it was a 4-point game. Outside of the Vikings game and, outside of Seattle and the Cardinals game, I mean, they really hung in well versus everybody that they played. They had the big one against Green Bay. Obviously, they finished 1-5 in the division again. But, I mean, overall, they had, there's probably, 3-4 games there that they could very easily have won. We could very easily be sitting here talking about a 10-6 team right now. And obviously, I don't think they had a talent to do that. I definitely think it'll translate over next year. I mean, there's really no way that this team could get much worse. I think another year within the system as a whole is going to be good, more talent. So I think things are really looking up for them. Another thing to really look at as far as, the 6-10 finish. Okay, yeah, they finished in last place. They improved over last year, which is good. But at the same time, I mean, they're going to be facing, the 2 other NFC teams that they play. They're going to be facing the 4th place teams. They got the NFC East next year, who hasn't really been strong in the last few years, and they also have the AFC South. So overall, they're going to go from one of the harder schedules in the league this year to a much easier one next year. I think that's really going to help them, especially with what they're going to be able to do. So, I mean, you really look at this year and you see good development out of, quite a few different positions. Their defense was head and shoulders above this year. I think part of that was a little bit of fool's gold. I mean, you really look at the way some things happen, and obviously some of the numbers are superficial, but you can also look at it and see that they gave up quite a few points, from the point total off of, pick sixes, turnovers, and returns. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot to work on. I definitely think the coaching staff has this team going in the right direction. I don't think the NFC North is it's not weak by any means, but I don't think it's too strong. I think with a good offseason and some good development, I really think they can be a good team next year. So we'll have to see. I think it was about what anybody could have hoped for at this point. There was some good development going on, and that's really all you can hope for. So overall, it's a little disappointing to finish off, 6-10. But at the same time, any team that John Fox has had in his second year has made a huge leap. So we'll just have to see what happens. But I definitely think there's a lot to be excited about, and I definitely think the arrow's pointing up.
And I would agree with you 100% on that note. And not to make any excuses for this team, because I even think, if this squad was fully healthy, I still wouldn't be sure if they would be a playoff team. But there were a lot of injuries for this Bears team this season, as it seems like every season. It's just a part of the game. But a lot of guys were given an opportunity to step up. Who are a few guys that have stood out, made the most of their opportunities over the last few weeks since the Bears were officially knocked out of playoff contention? I got to think a guy like John Timu is somebody that kind of tops that list.
Yeah, I definitely think, there's been a few guys that have really come in and played pretty well. John Timu was obviously one of them. I think Jonathan Anderson, when given the chance, has played pretty well. Harold Jones-Corte had flashes. I mean, he had a little bit of a rough game today, but really most everybody on the defense did. I think Kadeem Carey's another guy. He went from being one of those people who I really didn't think was going to be on the roster to somebody who, especially if they let Forte walk in free agency, which I expect them to do. I mean, I think he can be a good, formidable number 2 back. I mean, another guy is Deontay Thompson, who's come in, has picked up halfway through the year, came in and has been very good as a kick returner, and a show that he's got a little bit of a deep threat ability, and that's something that could be big for them next year. I think, add another element to the offense. So, I mean, overall, they've had some guys really come in. Bryce Callahan's been a big surprise as an undrafted free agent. I mean, took the nickel job partway through the year and has done a very good job with it. And they've had all sorts of guys, and that's been nice to see. But overall, I definitely think John Timu has made a case for him being on the roster for next year. I'm not sure I'm going to go as far as saying that I think he's a starter going into next year. But worst case, I think, bringing Shea McClellan back on a 1-year deal for, $1 million or league minimum, and bringing Timu in to compete with him for that position, I think they could do a lot worse. So overall, I mean, there was some good development, and we'll just have to see what happens further on down the line. But I think they've definitely found some keepers for the 53-man roster next year.
Again, the Bears fall to the Detroit Lions 24-20 at home, Soldier Field. Finished the season with a 1-7 home record, and obviously they are now last in the division on the season. They finished last in the division on the season. Aaron, as always, I mean, this has been really fun to do throughout the season. Before I let you go, is there anything else you feel the need to touch on?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, I mean, like I said, they finished off good. Right now, as it stands, they're going to be right at about the 11th pick. They could move up to 10th with a Tampa Bay win. We'll see what happens. But, overall, just really caution fans. It's been a rough year in some senses, but I definitely think this team's going in the right direction. It's going to be a long off season. Hopefully you guys enjoy the season, because there's about an 8-month layoff from the time that they finish Week 17 from the time that they start out Week 1. But there's definitely going to be some moves to be had. Ryan Pace has got this team moving in the right direction. And even if they do end up losing a guy like Adam Gase, I definitely think they're going to be able to fill that position. So overall, just hang tight for, a pretty fun offseason. I think there's going to be a lot of different moves going on, and this 53-man roster is going to look a lot different from right now to when it's going to look Week 1. So just keep optimistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, if history serves us right, I mean, next year will certainly be a better year under John Fox for the Chicago Bears. And like I said, Aaron, thanks a lot for doing joining the show, every week to do this post-game show, whether it was immediately after the game, few days afterwards. I really do appreciate you taking some time each and every week, and it's been a blast, and hopefully we could catch back up within the next few weeks and kind of talk about the season as a whole, and talk about some off-season needs for this Bears team in 2016.
Absolutely, man. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can do something here in the near future.
Hey, sounds great. Have a great 2016, my friend. Happy New Year's.
You too, man.